New details are beginning to emerge after 4 children were found shot in a car at an Angleton gas station. A 13-year-old boy and 3-year-old girl died. An 8-year-old boy and 9-year-old girl still recovering.
It was just before dawn in Angleton, Texas. That quiet hour when the world is half asleep, when the hum of the highway is the only sound cutting through the darkness. A gray sedan sat alone beneath the bright, cold lights of a gas station. Inside, there were children, still, silent, and eerily peaceful. Moments later, police sirens pierced the morning air, and the truth behind that parked car would send shockwaves through the entire community. Her name was Oninda Romulus, a 31-year-old mother of 4. To some, she was a familiar face at the local grocery store, soft-spoken, polite, always with her kids in tow. To others, she was a mystery, a woman who carried too much weight behind her smile. But no one could have imagined what she was about to do. When authorities received the 911 call around 4:45 a.m., they expected another early morning emergency, maybe a car accident, maybe a domestic disturbance. What they found instead was a tragedy so chilling, even seasoned officers had to step back. 2 children, lifeless. 2 others fighting for theirs. And the person behind the wheel, the one who had made the call, their own mother. The story of Oninda Romulus would soon make national headlines. A mother accused of taking the lives of the children she had once cradled, protected, and nurtured. But behind that horrifying headline was something deeper. A story of mental unraveling, hidden fear, and a series of moments that might have gone unnoticed until it was far too late. Neighbors would later say she seemed normal. She smiled when she picked up her children from school. She waved to the mailman. She was even seen laughing with her kids outside their small home just days before everything fell apart. No one could reconcile the woman they knew with the headlines that followed. But as investigators began piecing together her life, a picture began to form, one that told a story of instability and quiet desperation. Court documents revealed a history of troubling behavior, legal issues from another state, and moments of paranoia that she sometimes shared in fragments with those close to her. "They're going to take them from me," she once said. "They won't hurt me if I don't let them." Those words would echo painfully after that morning. Oninda had once appeared on television, full of life and laughter. Years before the tragedy, she had been featured on the show Paternity Court, trying to untangle the complexities of her personal life, a glimpse of a woman who wanted answers, who wanted control over a world that seemed to be slipping through her fingers. But fame, even brief, could not shield her from the storm quietly brewing inside. The gas station security cameras captured the last moments before the tragedy. The timestamp read 4:43 a.m. Her car rolled to a stop beside the pump. She stepped out, filled her tank, and made a call. Then she returned to the driver's seat and sat for a long moment, motionless, staring straight ahead. There were no raised voices, no argument, no visible struggle. Just silence. When officers arrived minutes later, they found a scene that would haunt them for years. The back seat, once filled with laughter, toys, and backpacks, was now still. 2 of her children, ages 13 and 3, were gone. 2 others, ages 8 and 9, were critically injured but alive. In the hours that followed, Oninda was taken into custody, her expression blank, her voice quiet. When asked what happened, she allegedly whispered, "They're safe now, no one can hurt them." To investigators, those words raised as many questions as they answered. Was this the act of evil, or of a mind lost to darkness? What drove a mother to such an unfathomable decision? This is not just the story of a crime. It's the story of a mother's descent, the missed signs, and a community left shattered. As we uncover the events that led to that cold morning in Angleton, we'll look at who Oninda Romulus really was, not just the woman in the headlines, but the human being behind the choices that forever changed 4 innocent lives. Because before she became the center of a nationwide tragedy, she was a mother, just like millions of others, trying to make it through another day. And yet, somehow, something inside her broke. And when it did, the world around her would never be the same again. Before tragedy cast its shadow, Oninda Romulus was known to most as a loving mother, attentive, organized, and fiercely protective of her 4 children. She wasn't a woman who sought attention. Her world revolved around the simple routines of motherhood: school runs in the morning, after-school snacks waiting on the counter, and bedtime stories that lulled her children to sleep. To the outside world, her life appeared normal, maybe even peaceful. But behind that calm exterior, cracks had already begun to form. She had grown up in Florida, in a family that was close but burdened by financial struggles. As a teenager, she was described as smart, ambitious, and caring, someone who always wanted to help others. She dreamed of becoming a nurse or a counselor, hoping to create a better future for herself and her family. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Her relationships were complicated. Those who knew her said she fell in love easily, trusted quickly, and gave her heart completely, sometimes to people who didn't deserve it. That pattern would follow her into adulthood. After a few unstable relationships and the birth of her children, Oninda found herself raising them mostly on her own. She tried to keep things together, juggling part-time jobs, paying bills late, and fighting to maintain a sense of stability. Yet, even through the exhaustion, she adored her children. Her social media was filled with smiling pictures, birthday parties, first days of school, homemade dinners. She posted quotes about faith and resilience. "God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers," she once wrote beneath a photo of her and her youngest child. Those words, meant to inspire, would later feel like a haunting echo of her silent struggle. Friends recall that she often seemed anxious, worried that someone might take her kids away. She had moved several times, sometimes without clear explanation. One friend said she seemed paranoid, always looking over her shoulder, always double-checking the locks on her doors. Still, no one thought it was serious. After all, many single mothers face stress and fear. Few imagine those emotions could spiral into something dangerous. Her appearance on Paternity Court years earlier showed another side of her life, the side that was chaotic and uncertain. During the show, she smiled, laughed nervously, and shared fragments of her story. It was supposed to be a moment of closure, a chance to find answers about one of her children's fathers. But even in that televised moment, there was a flicker of pain in her eyes, the look of someone holding back more than they were saying. By 2024, Oninda had relocated to Texas with her 4 children. The move was meant to be a fresh start, a chance to rebuild and leave behind whatever troubles had followed her from Florida. She rented a modest home in Angleton, a quiet town where neighbors minded their own business and life moved at a slower pace. At first, things seemed to improve. She enrolled her children in school, found a local church to attend, and spoke often about new beginnings.
Tonight, we are learning a mother is charged in Brazoria County for allegedly shooting her 4 children. Just before 5 a.m. Saturday, sheriff's deputies were called to a Shell gas station off of Highway 288 in Angleton. 2 children were shot and killed. 2 other kids were shot and survived. Troy Kless joining us live in Brazoria County tonight with the latest details from investigators. Troy.
Yeah, Marcelino, the sheriff, called this an unthinkable tragedy as right now, as you mentioned, the suspect, a mom, is in jail accused of shooting and killing 2 of her kids and injuring 2 others. Now today, we learned some additional details about that shooting. Deputies say at 4:48 a.m., the mom identified as 31-year-old Oninda Romulus, pulled into the Shell gas station off of Highway 288. When deputies responded, they began life-saving measures on the victims. The sheriff's office also saying today that the victims who died are a 13-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. The surviving victims are an 8-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl who are now in stable condition. The sheriff's office has not said where and when the gunshots were fired. Brazoria County Sheriff Bo Stallman spoke at a news conference this afternoon.
We believe that the evidence shows that this tragedy has occurred inside of the vehicle and that Romulus, the mother of the children, is the shooter. At 4:48 a.m. yesterday, Romulus called the Brazoria County Sheriff's Office.
Sheriff Stallman confirms the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office assisted in their investigation and searched Romulus's home in Porter. They did not share what they have found at this time. Now, the mom is currently in the jail and has a $14 million bond for those 4 charges. As for the 2 children who survived the shooting, they have spoken with investigators, although there is still plenty of details that we're still waiting to learn, including a potential motive for this shooting. Reporting live in Brazoria County, Troy Kless, KHOU 11 News.
Such a disturbing story, a lot more to learn, Troy. Thanks for that live report.
Our Ugochi Aloka joining us live now with what neighbors are saying. And Ugochi, where did this family live?
Alona and Jacob, jail records show that 31-year-old Oninda Romelos lived in a home in Porter that is about an hour away north of Angleton, where her kids were found shot in a car. Now, the Brazoria County Sheriff's Office says that they initially found out about the shooting through a 911 call. Take a listen to when deputies were first dispatched to the scene.
We need multiple ambulances.
KHOU11 got this exclusive video Saturday evening of investigators going in and out of Romelos' home. They were there for around 12 hours, appearing to collect evidence. They also towed away a car from the driveway. Neighbors tell us Romelos lived only at this house for about a few months. Many had not interacted with her at all. Residents are feeling uneasy after learning Romelos is accused of shooting her 4 children and killing 2 of them. One neighbor, who says they often saw Romelos' children, calls this shooting a terrible tragedy.
Seeing them Friday, and they were happy and on their way, telling us hi and bye, and figuring I would see them again Monday afternoon. Heartbreaking to think that anything could be so bad that you have to take your children's life. I don't understand.
Very devastating there. We're told that 2 other children recovering in the hospital have since been interviewed by deputies, and they say they are cooperating. Coming up in the next hour on KHOU11 Plus at 7 a.m., hear more from that neighbor, as well as where the investigation stands now. Reporting live this morning, Ugochi Iloka, KHOU 11 News.
Ugochi, thank you.
But beneath that optimism, her mental state appeared to be deteriorating. Some neighbors noticed her talking to herself outside or pacing the yard late at night. Others heard shouting from inside the home, not violent, but distressed, like someone arguing with unseen voices. She began telling friends she felt unsafe, that someone was watching, or that something bad was coming. They urged her to seek help, but she brushed it off. "I'm fine," she'd say. "I just need rest." One evening, she visited a relative and seemed especially tense. She spoke rapidly, jumped from one topic to another, and clutched her children close to her. When asked if everything was okay, she smiled faintly and replied, "As long as I have them, I'll be fine." That night, after putting her children to bed, she sat alone in the living room. Her phone buzzed with unanswered messages, bills due, reminders from school, texts from a family member asking if she was okay. Her social media posts turned more cryptic. "They won't understand until it's too late," she wrote in one. "I'm trying to protect them." To anyone scrolling by, it might have seemed like another emotional post from an overwhelmed parent. But in hindsight, it was a warning. The following days were quiet, too quiet. Her children didn't show up for school. Calls went unanswered. Then, in the early hours of that Sunday morning, she packed all 4 of them into her gray sedan. No one knows exactly what she told them or what was going through her mind. But that drive would be their last together. By 4:30 a.m., she pulled into the gas station. Surveillance footage later showed her moving calmly, almost methodically. She filled the car with fuel, glanced around, then returned to the driver's seat. A few minutes later, the stillness of the early morning was broken by a 911 call from her phone. When officers arrived, they found the unthinkable. 2 of her children, ages 13 and 3, were gone. 2 others, ages 8 and 9, were barely clinging to life. And Oninda herself, alive, sitting silently behind the wheel. The news spread fast. "Mother arrested after children found dead in car," the headlines read. But for those who knew her, disbelief replaced anger. How could this happen? What had she been thinking? Had anyone seen the warning signs? The answers would come slowly, through interviews, court documents, and heartbreaking testimony. But even as the facts emerged, they would raise deeper, more painful questions. What drives a parent to harm the very people they love most? And how many cries for help go unheard until it's too late? Before that dawn in Texas, Oninda Romulus was a mother, flawed, frightened, but deeply human. The tragedy that followed was not born in a moment of rage, but out of months, maybe years, of quiet unraveling. And as the community would soon learn, the truth behind what happened inside that car would shake the foundations of what we think we know about mental health, motherhood, and the desperate ways people try to protect the ones they love. When police arrived at the gas station that morning, the sky was still dark, the kind of darkness that makes everything feel suspended, as though the world itself is holding its breath. Officers approached the gray sedan cautiously, unsure of what they were walking into. The car's headlights were still on, the engine humming quietly. Inside, what they found left even the most experienced first responders shaken. 2 children, lifeless. 2 others, gravely injured. Their mother, Oninda Ramos, sat in the driver's seat, her hands trembling, her gaze distant. When officers asked her what happened, she didn't fight or run. She simply whispered something that chilled them to the bone. "They're safe now." That single sentence would echo through the entire investigation. What did she mean by safe? Safe from what? From whom? Detectives quickly secured the scene. Paramedics rushed the surviving children to the hospital, fighting to keep them alive. Meanwhile, Oninda was taken into custody, still eerily calm. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't cry. She didn't even ask about her children. She just sat there, staring blankly at the wall, murmuring under her breath as if having a private conversation with someone only she could see. At the Angleton Police Department, detectives began reconstructing her last 48 hours. The story they uncovered was far more complex and far more heartbreaking than anyone expected. Through interviews with family and friends, a picture emerged of a woman unraveling quietly under the weight of her fears. One friend told police that Oninda had recently confided in her about voices that wouldn't stop. She believed people were following her. She thought someone was trying to take her children away. Another acquaintance said she had been convinced that the government was watching her, that her phone, her car, even her home were bugged. Investigators dug into her digital history and found hours of online searches about paranoia, protection from spiritual attacks, and cases of child custody disputes. In some searches, she seemed to be looking for help, mental health resources, family therapy, or signs of losing control. But the searches grew darker in tone over time, pointing toward a mind consumed by fear. The most disturbing detail came from her social media. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, she had posted several cryptic messages that now read like cries for help. "The world isn't safe for kids anymore," one post read. Another said, "If I can't protect them here, I'll protect them somewhere else." No one had known how literal those words would become. Police also discovered she had been living with increasing isolation. Her relationship with the children's father had grown tense. Financial troubles were piling up. There were reports of erratic behavior, sudden mood swings, sleepless nights, bouts of crying that ended as quickly as they began. She stopped attending church, stopped talking to friends, and spent more and more time locked inside her home with her children. To investigators, it was a perfect storm, a fragile mind overwhelmed by stress, losing its grip on reality. But to the community, the story was something deeper and harder to face. A mother, someone just like the women next door, consumed by a darkness no one could see. At the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to save the surviving children. The news that 2 were still alive offered a small glimmer of hope. Detectives visited the hospital daily, waiting for the moment when one of the children might wake and share what happened inside that car. But when they did, the truth only deepened the heartbreak. One of the surviving children reportedly told investigators that their mother had been crying during the drive. She told them she loved them more than anything in the world, and that no one would ever hurt them again. The child didn't understand what she meant, They only knew she was sad, her voice trembling as she repeated those words. Moments later, everything went dark. When the details of that account reached the public, the emotional fallout was immediate. The community that had once reacted with anger began to feel something more complex: sorrow. Mental health professionals, faith leaders, and neighbors gathered for vigils, struggling to make sense of it all. This wasn't a monster, one pastor said during a memorial. This was a mother who needed help and didn't get it in time.
Tonight, we're uncovering disturbing new details about a mother accused of shooting her 4 children, killing 2 of them. This is 31-year-old Oninda Romulus, seen here in a 2022 mugshot from Georgia when she was arrested on drug charges. We're also learning Child Protective Services had previously been called to her home, but details of that case remain unclear.
Troy Kless has been following all of this since the weekend, and he spoke with the suspect's father earlier today. He's in Angleton for us tonight. Troy?
We've been working to learn more about Romulus, who is in jail, and any motive for the shooting. Meanwhile, in newly obtained court documents, we're learning about what Romulus told investigators after she was arrested, but a motive for the shooting is still unclear.
New details are beginning to emerge after 4 children were found shot in a car at an Angleton gas station. A 13-year-old boy and 3-year-old girl died. An 8-year-old boy and 9-year-old girl still recovering.
Brazoria County deputies responded to an unthinkable, unimaginable tragedy.
The kid's mom, 31-year-old Oninda Romulus, is now in custody, charged with murder, and according to charging documents, gave disturbing statements to the Brazoria County Sheriff's Office investigators who spoke with her after the shooting. Court documents obtained by KHOU 11 share Romulus told investigators her children were with the devil. According to the affidavit, law enforcement says surveillance video shows Romulus drove to this gas station off Highway 288 in Angleton, where she called 911. When asked during her interview why she called authorities, Romulus told investigators, quote, "Instead of them doing it to me, I'm going to do it to them," and continued saying, "Kill them all." Romulus lived at this home in Porter for just a few months with her 4 children, identified in court documents as Ocario Covington, Amora Chappelle, Kylie Romulus, and Traviel Downer. Neighbors telling our Orco Manna the children were happy and they saw them just a few days ago.
He always waves and we tell him hi, and they come back by, and I have a little Yorkie, and sometimes she'll stop and ask if she can pet the puppy. Just seeing them Friday, and they were happy and on their way, telling us hi and bye, and figuring I would see them again Monday.
The home is in the New Caney ISD. We reached out to the district asking if the kids attend school, and they replied stating while they're deeply saddened, out of respect for the investigation, the district wouldn't provide information about the individuals or their connection to our schools. Meanwhile, today, Romulus's dad told me on the phone from his home in Georgia he's trying to understand what happened.
Romulus is still being held on a $14 million bond. The surviving children are still recovering in the hospital. Troy Kless, KHOU 11 News.
Such a tragic case with so many questions. Troy Kless with what we do know tonight. Appreciate you.
Still, others demanded accountability. They wanted to know how someone showing such clear signs of distress slipped through the cracks. Why hadn't Child Services intervened? Why hadn't anyone recognized the danger? As more information came to light, it became clear that Oninda had never formally sought professional help. There were no active mental health records, no prescriptions, no documented diagnoses, just fragments of concern from people who saw her pain but didn't know what to do. Inside the interrogation room, detectives struggled to reach her. One officer later said, "It was like talking to someone caught between 2 worlds." She would drift in and out of coherence, sometimes sobbing quietly, other times insisting she had done the right thing. "They'll thank me one day," she said softly. "They'll understand." Those words became a haunting reminder of just how deeply her mind had fractured. When prosecutors announced the charges, 2 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of attempted capital murder, the case became a lightning rod for debate. Some called for justice, others for compassion. How do you punish someone who might not have been in control of their own mind? Meanwhile, her family was left shattered. Her mother, devastated, told reporters, "I don't understand. That's not my baby. She loved those kids more than life itself." Her relatives back in Florida replayed old memories, birthdays, laughter, moments that now felt like pieces of a life that didn't make sense anymore. In the weeks that followed, the surviving children were placed under protective care, surrounded by relatives trying to help them heal. But healing in this case would take more than time. The scars left behind, emotional, psychological, spiritual, would run deep. As the investigation continued, forensic psychologists were brought in to evaluate Oninda's mental state. Their findings pointed toward severe psychosis, possibly postpartum depression that had evolved into something far more dangerous over the years. They believed she had been experiencing delusions of persecution and fear, convinced that taking her children's lives was an act of protection rather than harm. The evidence aligned with a heartbreaking truth. This was not a story of cruelty, but of collapse. A human mind, overwhelmed and untreated, had turned inward, and in trying to save what she loved most, Oninda had destroyed it. In the courtroom, the tension was unbearable. Each hearing drew crowds, some seeking justice, others searching for understanding. Every new detail revealed another layer of tragedy. Witnesses spoke of her kindness, her laughter, her devotion to her children. Prosecutors spoke of the horror of her actions. And through it all, Oninda sat quietly, her face expressionless, as though she were listening to someone else's story. The community's emotions became divided. Some saw her as a cautionary tale about unchecked mental illness. Others saw her as irredeemable. But for those closest to her, the hardest part was the unanswered question: could this have been prevented? Because the truth is, the signs were there. The isolation, the paranoia, the fear. They were warning flares in the night that no one saw clearly until it was far too late. By the time the investigation concluded, one reality stood firm. This tragedy didn't begin in that gas station parking lot. It began long before, in the quiet spaces of a woman's breaking mind, in the silence of unspoken fears, in a world that often expects mothers to be invincible. And as the case moved toward trial, the emotional storm it unleashed continued to ripple outward, reshaping the lives of everyone connected to her, from the officers who first arrived on the scene to the family members who now had to pick up the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. The morning of April 17, 2016, was still and silent across the quiet street of Southwest 280th Street in South Miami Heights. The sun had barely risen when neighbors were startled by the sharp, desperate sound of screaming. It wasn't the kind of noise that could be mistaken for anything ordinary. It was raw, fearful, human. Inside the modest home, chaos had broken out, a chain of violence that would shatter a family and leave an entire community in grief. 23-year-old Oninda Ramos had been a young mother, bright, protective, and deeply devoted to her children. But that morning, she found herself trapped in a nightmare no parent could ever imagine. Her teenage son, Stevie Romulus, was outside in the driveway, gripping a shotgun, eyes wide, voice trembling, and heart overwhelmed with a storm of emotion that would change everything forever. Moments earlier, neighbors heard shouting. Some peeked through blinds, others stepped onto porches. What they saw was a blur of confusion, a mother trying to calm her son, and a boy, barely 16, standing just a few feet away, weapon in hand. Then, the thunder of a single shot. The sound ripped through the quiet morning air. Oninda fell. Her daughter, who had been beside her, ran to her mother's side, screaming for help. Neighbors rushed to the yard, calling 911 as the young boy dropped the gun and fell to his knees. The weight of what had just happened hit him instantly, the unthinkable reality that the person he loved most in the world was gone. When police arrived, the scene was haunting. A teenage boy, trembling, was being comforted by officers, while paramedics tried to save his mother. Despite their efforts, Oninda Romulus was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation that followed revealed the devastating truth. This was no planned act of hatred, no deliberate attack. Instead, it was a tragedy rooted in youthful impulsiveness, fear, and misunderstanding. Earlier that morning, an argument had erupted between Oninda and her son over household rules, a disagreement that had spiraled out of control. Gene, frustrated and angry, had gone to his father's truck where the firearm was stored. Reports later indicated he retrieved the shotgun, intending only to scare, not harm. But the moment he stepped outside, emotions collided with panic, and in an instant that couldn't be undone, the weapon fired. The shock in the community was immediate. Neighbors who had known Oninda described her as kind and hardworking, a devoted mother raising her kids with discipline and love. The idea that her life had ended in such a way, and at the hands of her own son, was too painful to comprehend. The tragedy spread beyond the block. Local media picked up the story, headlines filled social media, and grief poured in from strangers who couldn't understand how something like this could happen in a quiet Miami neighborhood. Inside the Romulus family, grief was heavy and complex. Gene's father, devastated, stood torn between mourning his wife and supporting his son. The balance between love and loss, between forgiveness and accountability, became almost unbearable. As detectives pieced the events together, they faced the question of intent. Was it an accident? Was it rage? Or was it the dangerous mixture of teenage emotion and easy access to a weapon? The forensic evidence pointed to a single fatal shot. The position of the shell, the distance between them, the direction of the muzzle, all suggested that Gene had not aimed deliberately. The discharge, though deadly, appeared unintentional. But no amount of analysis could erase the heartbreak. When police took Gene into custody, his cries echoed in the patrol car, not of rebellion, but of guilt. "I didn't mean to," he kept repeating. "I didn't mean to." The state attorney faced a difficult decision. Should a 16-year-old be tried as an adult for killing his mother? Or was this tragedy punishment enough for a lifetime? In the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Gene sat small in his oversized orange jumpsuit, eyes downcast. His father sat in the back, tears streaking his face. Family, friends, pastors, and community members filled the room, their presence a silent prayer for mercy. When the prosecutor read the charge, manslaughter with a deadly weapon, the words seemed to hang heavy in the air. The defense argued that the shooting was accidental, that the boy was consumed by grief, and that he had immediately shown remorse. The judge listened carefully, weighing the evidence, the testimonies, and the humanity of a boy whose mistake had cost his mother her life. After weeks of proceedings, the court's decision reflected both justice and compassion. Gene was sentenced to a rehabilitation program rather than prison, with mandatory counseling and community service. The goal wasn't vengeance, it was understanding, healing, and preventing another tragedy like this. But for those who loved Oninda, the wound remained. Her daughter, who had witnessed everything, struggled with trauma for years. Family members spoke of her nightmares, the way she'd wake up screaming for her mother. Counseling helped, but the memory never left. As time passed, Gene grew quieter, more reflective. He told counselors that he replayed that day in his head over and over, wishing he had just walked away, wishing he had remembered his mother's voice, the same voice that had always told him to be patient, to breathe, to never let anger lead. He carried that lesson now, painfully carved into his heart. Years later, on the anniversary of her death, neighbors gathered at the Romulus home for a candlelight vigil. The air was calm, filled with the scent of fresh lilies and soft murmurs of prayer. Photos of Oninda were displayed, her smiling face, her children beside her, moments from birthdays and holidays. Her father spoke softly to the crowd. She was light, and even in her last moments, that light didn't go out. It's still in her children. As candles flickered, Gene stood quietly among them, now older, with eyes that carried the weight of everything he'd learned. He didn't speak that night, but those who knew him said he didn't have to. His silence said it all, the kind of remorse that words could never capture. In the years that followed, Oninda's story became more than a headline. It became a conversation. Communities began speaking more openly about youth anger, gun access, and family tension. Schools and churches used her story to teach emotional awareness and conflict management, emphasizing the power of communication over confrontation. Her life, though cut short, became a reminder of how fragile moments can be, how a single decision, born from emotion, can change everything forever. And perhaps that's what makes her story so haunting, yet so important. Because it wasn't about hate. It wasn't about malice. It was about a moment, A fragile second where emotion outweighed reason. A moment that changed lives, but also opened eyes. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt overwhelmed, angry, or unheard, take a breath. Walk away. Speak before you act. Because life is something you can never rewind. If you found this story moving, please share it. Someone out there might need to hear it. Like, comment, and subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be remembered. Not for how they ended, but for what they can teach us. Because every story, no matter how tragic, carries a truth, and truth deserves to be heard.